Hello everyone, my name is John Blanford. I'm the video team leader for Blug. In this video I'd like to give you a quick overview of how we go about doing recordings of presentations at the Fest and how we do live streaming at the Fest. So what I've got here is the Linux Fest YouTube channel, and notice we've created playlists for every year that we've done recording. So we've been doing it since 2015, although you can see that for 2015 we only had 7 successful recordings, so it wasn't our best year for the old video team. But since then we've been doing much better, and we record around 70 videos each year. And this coming year, 2019, I expect we'll do at least 70, if not more, videos. So what's the process? How do we do that? Well, what I've got here is a schematic of the equipment and sort of the flow of information when we're doing a recording. And I know there's lots of icons and lines and stuff like that going on here. It's a little busy. But let me go through each part step by step, and hopefully it'll help you make sense of how we go about doing all this. So we start up here. Notice we have a lectern and we have an overhead projector. Right? So every room where we're doing presentations at Bethlehem Technical College at BTC has a lectern and at least one overhead projector. So let me show you some photos here. So for those of you who are BTC students, this comes as a review. You already know what the rooms look like, but for those of you who are not BTC students, I'll show you some stuff here. So this is our biggest room. It's called G103. It's over in the cafeteria building at BTC. And notice here's our presenter, and there's a little lectern. There's a little small portable lectern that goes in this room. And this room actually has 2 overhead projectors. You can see one here and one there, feeding the 2 screens. A lot of our rooms are not as big as G103. They're more classroom size. So this is a picture of one of the classrooms. This was one we're actually not using for presentations. This will be our video control room. It's called the hardware lab for the CNET department. But again, you can notice it's hard to see, but in the corner here there's a little lectern, right? And there's an overhead projector that's feeding the screen. The overhead projector is not visible in this shot. But every room has a lectern and an overhead projector, right? And that forms sort of the basis of how we do the recordings. So let me go back here. So every lectern has an auxiliary input. It's usually labeled laptop. And if we were not doing a recording or a stream, what would happen is that the presenter would come in with their laptop, they would go over to the lectern, and they would hook up the HDMI output from their laptop to the lectern's laptop input, which would then show it in the overhead projector, right? And then whatever they show up there, in some cases, in many cases, they have a slide deck and they'll show slides, or they'll do a demonstration of software, or they might show code and things like that, technical conference. But essentially they show some stuff on the overhead projector to the people that are in the room, and then they talk about it, right? So those are the things, the 2 things that form the heart of what we want to record. We want to see for our viewers on YouTube what the presenter put on the overhead projector, and we also want to hear what the presenter talked about while he's showing the stuff on the overhead projector. So for us, that's the heart of the recordings that we do. We record a copy of what goes to the overhead projector, and we put a microphone in the room and record whatever the presenter is talking about as stuff goes to the overhead projector. So that's what this part is here. This part comes from BTC. What we do is when the presenter comes into the room, instead of connecting directly to the auxiliary input on the lectern, we have an HDMI splitter. So here's our HDMI connection, and it goes to the splitter. So this cable will be a full-size HDMI male cable that will go connect into the presenter's laptop. Some of the newer laptops don't have full-size HDMI, so we tell the presenter, bring an adapter for your laptop. Some of them don't, they forget, so we also have some adapters that we can let them borrow and stuff like that. But essentially the HDMI signal comes out of the presenter's laptop, goes into the splitter. And the splitter does what its name implies, is it splits that single input into two outputs. Right? So we got one signal comes in, two signals identical come out. One of them we'd send to the lectern and the laptop input. So people in the room will see what's coming out of the presenter's laptop via this copy of the HDMI signal that goes to the laptop. The other copy that comes out of the splitter goes into our equipment down here, which is all this stuff that does the recording or the live stream. Okay? So that's the key, is that we split whatever comes out of the laptop into two parts, two identical copies of the HDMI. One we send to the overhead projector, the other we send to our equipment. So, as I said, this is our stuff down here. Let me talk about these parts. The key sort of central hub of the recording system is this little guy down here. It's a little mini computer. This is one of the new things we're using in 2019. We're using a small form factor computer that's produced by Intel. They call them Next Unit of Computing, or NUC, which people often call just NUCs. So we have a system, a NUC system, that is going to be our central recording computer. In that computer, we'll be running a piece of open source software called OBS Studio. So let me show you what that looks like. Here is the Intel website, and they've got some pictures of what that little NUC looks like. There's no scale on this thing, so it's hard to judge, but it's about 4.5 inches square by like 1.5 inches or something like that deep. So a pretty small thing. And if you look at the front, it's got two USB ports on the front. If we look at the back of it, it has two more USB ports, has an HDMI output, and it's got a network connector, an Ethernet connector. Right, so here's another picture of it. The lid on top can be taken off and changed with something else. But this will be the system that is the main recorder. It has an internal hard drive, and we'll be recording onto that. The software we're going to be using is this. This is called Open Broadcaster Software, or OBS. And the version we're using is OBS Studio. And there's a view of what it looks like. I'll have another video about using OBS and how you do streaming and how you do recording and stuff like that. But for our purposes right now, it's going to be a piece of open source software that we'll use to do the recording and streaming. What's the purpose of it? Well, it takes multiple inputs. So it'll take multiple video and audio and graphics inputs and combines them together and creates a unified stream. And then that stream is sent to a file if you're doing a recording, or if you're doing a live stream, you take that stream and just send it off to YouTube, and all the viewers see the live stream, right? So OBS is responsible for taking all these different sources, combining them in a pleasing way, and creating a unified stream out of it. As I said, there'll be other videos about the details of how this works, but we're really excited about it here at the Fest because in the past we have used proprietary hardware and software, Apple QuickTime and things like that to do it. This year we're going to go fully open source, so we're really excited about that for OBS Studio. So back to our little diagram here. Here's our NUC running OBS Studio here. And notice we're getting inputs from various devices here. So let's look at this. First of all, most important input, remember we have the two HDMI outputs here from the splitter. One copy of that HDMI goes to this thing called a capture card. We're using capture cards that come from a company called Magwell. And this capture card's job is to take the HDMI signal, whatever comes out of the presenter's laptop, and do two things with it. One, it will put it into a format that we want to record in. So we're going to be recording in 1080p. So that's a resolution, 1080 progressive, and we'll be doing it 30 frames per second. If the laptop sends us other format of video, the capture card is responsible for doing the magic of rescaling it or whatever it needs to do to give us a nice clean 1080p 30 frames per second input. So that's one thing it does. The other thing it does is it takes that video and encodes it into a USB-based protocol. The protocol is called UVC. You can see it right here. So what we get, in goes HDMI, out comes a scaled video signal in USB, and since it's USB, we can plug it directly into our NUC, and OBS software will read it as an incoming video source. Okay? So whenever we're using HDMI, we can't go directly in the NUC. We have to use one of these capture cards to work with it. So this gives us the overhead projector input into our NUC. Down over here in the corner, we have a USB microphone. We use something called, the model is a Yeti, comes from a company called Blue, and that will be our microphone to capture what the presenter is saying. So if I come up here and I will show you a Blue Yeti, they look like this. There's another sideways picture here. Very nice, relatively inexpensive microphones, but they do a really nice job for us. And since they output USB directly, we don't have to do any kind of conversion or anything like that. We can just plug this USB microphone directly into the NUC, and again, OBS will recognize it as an audio source, and we can bring that into our stream. And I realized I forgot to show the HDMI capture card. So just as long as I'm here, the capture cards come from a company called Magwell. This again is pretty small. It's maybe about 4 inches by 2 inches or something like that. In one side, this side, we have an input of HDMI. On the other side is an output of USB. So the little card in one side, HDMI, out the other side, USB, and the USB goes to our NUC. Okay? So that Magwell is this guy right here. Okay? And the Yeti is this guy. Now, a little different this year. We haven't tried this before. This year we're going to add a camera into every room that we're doing recordings on, and try and capture an image of the presenter while they're talking. For most of the rooms, we're going to be using an inexpensive webcam. We'll be using the Logitech C922 camera sitting on a tripod. And that webcam outputs USB directly, so we can just plug that directly into OBS, and it'll become another video input for OBS Studio. Probably most of you have seen one of these, but here's a picture of the 922 Pro camera. We also have one low-end camcorder. It's a Canon camcorder. We'll be using in one of the rooms. And the camcorder gives us a little bit better quality output, but it requires a little bit more expensive. We have to have a capture card for it. The reason for that is the camcorder outputs HDMI, and again, we can't plug the HDMI directly in the NUC, so we have to go through another one of those Magwell capture cards to convert the HDMI into a USB protocol that we can get there. So for most rooms, we'll be using a Logitech webcam, and in one room, we'll be doing a camcorder. And if I show you here, this is the low-end camcorder. Probably seen things look like that. Again, they'll be sitting on a tripod. This one has a nice optical zoom, I think a 30-time optical zoom, and gives a nicer picture. So what we have, again, the components, we've got the overhead projector, we've got our laptop, its splitter, we got our recording stuff. And then the last part is the people of how we're going to run this stuff, right? So one approach would be to put a member of the video team in every room and have them record or control the recording. We don't have a big enough team to do that. We have generally 8 rooms going simultaneously, so it's a lot of people to just turn the recording off and on. So what we do, and we've actually been doing this since 2015, we actually do a remote desktop connection. And we have members of the team called controllers, and here's our controller down here. And they go over the FestNet, they make a remote connection to the NUC in each room using a remote desktop protocol. We use something called VNC as a remote desktop protocol. And this person is responsible for running OBS, starting recording or streaming, and then when it's over, stopping the recording and streaming, right? Each controller is responsible for 4 rooms. So for the 8 rooms that we're doing, we'll have 2 controllers, each running 4 rooms, right? So that's a key component on there. So again, components, we've got our overhead projector, we get the presenter's video, split it, send it to our recording system. We have audio and auxiliary video coming in there, and then we have a member of the the video team controlling the whole thing over a remote desktop. So hopefully that gives you a bit of conceptual overview of how we do this. I will have other videos that will describe sort of the nuts and bolts of how you do a recording or how you do a streaming and stuff like that. But for this one, at least, we have a sort of general overview of what we're doing. All right, thank you for listening.